Trump's triumph this Wednesday night.
This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again.
The voters who swept him to power, what to expect from his second term, how Canada can prepare.
He's very transactional. It's difficult.
And how the world is reacting. Plus, the stinging defeat of Kamala Harris.
Do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves.
How the Democrats lost and the soul-searching the party will have to do.
Global National with Donna Friesen, reporting tonight from Washington.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. American voters have made their choice and former President Trump has defied all his critics. He has been convicted, shot at and called a fascist, and now he has crushed his opponents. Donald Trump is headed back to the Oval Office for a second term in what is a remarkable political comeback.
We overcame obstacles that nobody thought possible, and it is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy?
Final votes are still being tallied, but Trump not only won the Electoral College, he won the popular vote too. And Vice President Kamala Harris, who said on the eve of this election that she had the momentum, today conceded defeat.
The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for. But hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright.
And with me is our Washington Bureau Chief, Jackson Prosco. Jackson, Trump could not have hoped for a better result.
No, that's certainly the case, Donna. Not only did he win so big when it came to the Electoral College and control of the White House, he also won control potentially of the other branches of government. And this time, he knows how to use them.
The 47th President of the United States.
He didn't need to conquer by force. The American people willingly gave Donald Trump all the power he asked for.
This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have.
A multiracial, multi-generational coalition returned him to the Oval Office in a landslide, in a clear rejection of those in power and all they stand for.
I think this is a case of the American people saying, y'all are in charge of making stuff work. It's not working. We're going to put a new bunch of people in charge.
Trump's plans are no mystery. He has promised mass deportations and pardons for January 6th rioters who fought to keep him in power after his 2020 loss. He has vowed sprawling tariffs, coziness with dictators, and recrimination against political enemies and the press.
I will govern by a simple motto: promises made, promises kept. We're going to keep our promises. Nothing will stop me from keeping my word to you, the people.
This time, his power will be virtually unchecked. Voters delivered a Republican majority in the Senate and a cadre of fresh Trump loyalists in the House, which may still swing to his party's control. The Supreme Court is already stacked with justices he appointed, who are willing to bend the knee. If Trump's first term was controlled by those who brought guardrails, this second act will be supported by oligarchs, science skeptics, and Christian nationalists, rewarded for their loyalty to a man who demands nothing less.
And Jackson, Trump still has criminal cases pending against him as well. What happens to those when he's back in the White House?
Well, the Department of Justice is already working to dismiss the 2 federal cases brought by Special Counsel Jack Smith. They have to wind them down before Trump takes office because there's a policy about not prosecuting a sitting president of the United States. On top of that, if any prosecutions go forward of Trump associates and there are successful convictions, Trump will all but certainly issue pardons in those cases, Donna. So the judicial process against Donald Trump is officially over tonight.
Jackson Prosco, thank you. Kamala Harris called Donald Trump today to congratulate him on his win and then addressed her supporters, conceding that though she lost, they should not give up the fight and not lose hope. Neetu Garcha is at Howard University, where Harris gave that speech. Neetu, what was the tone of her address?
Donna, I'd say Kamala Harris's speech was a nuanced response to the loss. She said she was proud of the campaign and the way it was handled, the way it brought people of multiple walks of life together. She also reaffirmed the need to honor the Constitution after her phone call with President-elect Donald Trump, in which she offered support as part of a peaceful transfer of power. Take a listen.
A fundamental principle of American democracy is that when we lose an election, we accept the results. That principle, as much as any other, distinguishes democracy from monarchy or tyranny.
The vice president also highlighted the values that motivated her to run, reaffirming her commitment, especially around abortion and the right to choose, as well as around equal treatment under the law.
While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and the dignity of all people.
Neetu, this was a stinging defeat for Harris. What are her supporters saying?
Yeah, it was, Donna. The students that we heard from who were expecting to hear Kamala Harris speak on that stage behind me last night say that the results really gave them perspective around where support in this country really lies, and many of them are heartbroken.
I think it's just a loss of sense, you know. I mean, common sense would tell you you can't have a felon running our country.
It's hard to put into words, like, how heartbroken I am about this. This only goes to show that, like, women and women of color have to be flawless.
I don't want people, racist people who support him, to be empowered. Like, I have a little sister, and some like reproductive rights, things like that. Like, it actually makes me nervous.
Kamala Harris did speak directly to those young people here, encouraging them not to give up and to stay engaged. She also addressed that disappointment and the deep emotions around this loss, saying that the fight for the values that define this country is far from over, as she aimed to give a more hopeful response in the face of such a crushing defeat. Donna?
All right, Neetu Garcha at Howard University. Thank you. The political accounting of what went so right for Trump and so wrong for Harris is only just beginning, but already some clear trends are emerging. Our Eric Sorensen has been digging into what's behind the shift in support.
He has surprised half the country again.
It's a hard pill to swallow.
I will never apologize for defending America.
For many, it's incomprehensible that a former president facing numerous criminal investigations and convicted of felonies was reelected.
And I think this nation voted without a conscience.
And Donald Trump said he would.
Attack ads suggested Americans should know better this time. The attacks from people who worked with him.
I cannot in good conscience endorse Donald Trump.
The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
It didn't matter.
Baby, let's go, Trump!
Core believers in Trump have never wavered, but he also got support from people who feel they're just worse off.
He's a businessman. I think this country really needs to start working on our economy.
An Edison exit poll found of those worried most about the economy, 79% voted for Trump.
There's a huge anti-incumbency sentiment in the United States and elsewhere in Western democracies. So that certainly worked in Donald Trump's favor.
It's nothing new. Trump was elected 8 years ago by voters wanting change, and they turned to Joe Biden 4 years later because they wanted change from Trump. And in 2024,
It's joyful work, and we get the job done.
Try as she might to be the agent of change, Kamala Harris didn't connect enough with voters, unable to escape President Biden's unpopularity.
I revere this office.
By the time Biden got out of the race, it was almost too late for Harris to turn things around.
The state of the economy. That has been the albatross around Joe Biden's neck and Kamala Harris's neck. She never in any way separated herself from Biden.
For many voters, the election may not have been an endorsement of all things Trump, but about paying their bills.
I think that it's ultimately good for our country from an economic standpoint.
In short, Americans wanted change, and on voting day, Trump, once again, was the alternative to the status quo. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Trump's popularity with working-class voters and young men of all races helped increase his share of the vote almost everywhere. Jeff Semple is in Florida, digging into the demographic swing that worked in Trump's favor.
The Trump campaign, the moment Fox News made the call. They partied through the night. and into the streets.
Best night ever! Maybe it's a wake-up call.
This Canadian drove 24 hours from Quebec.
Maybe we could do the same in Canada and make Canada great again.
Facing a female candidate, the Trump campaign targeted young men of all races, a risky strategy that appears to have paid off.
Everyone's so happy. He's going to make everyone happy again.
Compared with 2020, exit polls suggest Trump garnered more votes from white men without a college education and from black men. But his biggest gains were made with a group long considered part of the Democrats' core support.
One of the most dramatic and surprising swings was with Latino voters, and men in particular, who voted overwhelmingly for Joe Biden in 2020, but last night turned to Trump.
Miami's Little Havana, a vibrant tapestry of salsa, cigars, and mega. Jarrell Vasquez's parents fled Cuba in 1980. He has a power washing business and says times are tough.
When you have immigrants staying in five-star hotels in New York City, and I have a father who's homeless on the street, there's something fundamentally wrong with that.
The top issues here, inflation and immigration, unbothered by Trump's language about minorities.
He's just like me. I talk what I have in my mind.
Trump just became the first Republican president to win Miami in 36 years.
Trump is chasing people from across the left-right spectrum who distrust the system.
This expert says Trump has redrawn the political landscape.
There was an underserved market of people who just don't like the establishment as a whole.
Trump tapped into the anger of young American men, and they helped hand him his second term as president. Jeff Semple, Global News, Miami.
On the stock market, Trump's win is going over well, partly because of his promises, but also because a decisive victory ensures a peaceful transfer of power. The Dow Jones closed at a record high today, up 3.6%. Donald Trump's Truth Social was up nearly 6%, and Elon Musk's net worth rose by billions of dollars as Tesla's shares surged by 15%. As America's neighbor, there is a lot at stake for Canada with Trump's win, and today Prime Minister Justin Trudeau congratulated him.
The world is actually even more difficult and more complicated than it was 4 years ago, and I know that there's lots of work for us to do.
Among the challenges heading our way, Trump's promise to introduce a minimum 10% tariff on imports. Our chief political correspondent David Aiken is looking at the potential impacts of a second Trump term. David.
Well, Donna, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland called for calm in the wake of Trump's win.
I want to say with utter sincerity and conviction to Canadians that Canada will be absolutely fine.
She noted, for example, that it was Trump himself who signed the current trade deal that governs the Canada-US-Mexico economic relationship. Meanwhile, Ontario Premier Doug Ford invited Trump to, quote, bet big on the Ontario-US trading relationship. The big concern is that Trump will make good on his election promise to slap a 10% tariff on anything made in Canada. Canada would respond with retaliatory tariffs. Experts say the net economic damage would be in excess of $30 billion and could cause job losses on both sides of the border. Trump's tariffs would also cause consumer prices to rise, stoking inflation. Ironically, many American voters told pollsters they voted for Trump because of concerns around affordability and inflation. Donna?
All right, David in Ottawa, thanks. Coming up, what the Trump presidency could mean for Ukraine, Asia, and the Middle East. We're back from Washington in a moment. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky congratulated Donald Trump today and reminded him how much Ukraine relies on American support. Trump says he will bring peace to Ukraine and the Middle East. The question is, at what cost? Redmond Shannon reports from London.
Donald Trump says he'll end the war in Ukraine within a day of taking office. Some in Ukraine fear that would mean a deal to cede land to Russia, but not everyone.
The thing he likes the least in his life is to lose.
This Ukrainian MP is optimistic about continued US support.
like Afghanistan became Biden's catastrophe, and he doesn't want his Afghanistan. I am sure in this.
Trump says NATO members should pay more for defense and thinks Taiwan should pay for U.S. protection against China, who he wants to tackle on trade.
We're going to tariff the hell out of them.
Beijing dodged questions about Trump's victory Wednesday. However, Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu called the win history's greatest comeback.
It will give him an even freer hand to operate, particularly in Gaza and more broadly in the region.
But a freer reign for Israel may not square with Trump's pledge to bring peace to the Middle East. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Ahead, some tips on how to decode Donald Trump. Welcome back to Washington. One Canadian who knows how to deal with Donald Trump is Canada's former ambassador to the U.S., David McNaughton. I spoke with him earlier. Former Ambassador McNaughton, thanks so much for joining us. You know the United States well from your time here as ambassador during the first Trump administration. Your thoughts on his victory in this campaign?
Well, you know, I'm a bit surprised at how overwhelming it was, but I wasn't surprised that he won, in the sense that whenever you have 2/3 of the population saying the country's going on the wrong track, it's really hard for an incumbent to win.
Well, what advice, though, can you offer people who haven't dealt with the Trump administration on how best to approach it? Is there a particular approach you need to take with him?
Well, I think I've said this before. He's very transactional. He's not ideological, and therefore, you have to kind of think about it in terms of what can we put on the table that is going to be of interest to him, that is going to help him achieve some of his objectives. And I think, a lot of those have to do with, not necessarily, trade. A lot of them are trade, but they are things like, how are we going to have common cause against some of the things that China has been doing? What are we going to do about, protecting the Arctic and, cybersecurity and a whole series of things that, weren't necessarily topics of bilateral discussions other than off in a corner somewhere. I think we've got to bring those forward and say, we're here, we're your closest neighbor and your partner and your friend, and we're here to help you achieve some of the things that you've been talking about.
Can you kind of help us decode Donald Trump? Because a lot of his rhetoric is so bombastic. The stuff he says at times is outrageous. He says that he wants to apply a 10% tariff on everything. Should we take those things at face value, or how do you figure out what's going to turn into a real policy?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, it's not without its challenges. And he's very mercurial, and you're right, there's a lot of rhetoric in anything that he does and says. At the beginning of his last administration, he said he was going to tear up NAFTA. And he didn't tear up NAFTA. We ended up with a deal that he said was the best trade deal that the United States had ever signed. So we've got to be strategic, we've got to be clever, we've got to think through some of the items that we know he's going to want to put on the table, and think through how we can respond in a positive manner, in a way which doesn't jeopardize Canadian interests, but is good for Canada and for the United States.
David McNaughton, former Canadian ambassador to the United States, thanks so much.
No problem at all. Thanks, Donna.
Divisions at the diner next, checking in with people in Pennsylvania after Trump's win. The postmortems on this election will be written in the days and months ahead, but to get some insight into what worked for Trump, Mike Armstrong went to a diner in rural Pennsylvania, a swing state where many voters have put their faith in Trump.
I think it went really well. I personally think that God was definitely in this, and I really feel it was time for a change.
Number one, the economy.
None of us has made any money since Biden was there. None of us. I don't care who you are.
I don't like the way the Democrats weaponized our courts. We should never weaponize our court system.
So the fact that they went after him helped him?
I believe so. I think it backfired on him big time.
How are you feeling?
Awful. Really.
You got room in Canada?
How are you guys feeling emotionally?
Not well. No, I'm sad and scared. I'm scared.
Groceries were a big deal because I cook and I know what it costs. And all that nonsense of men in women's sports and in the bathrooms and I mean all that. We're too old for that kind of stuff. I can't go along with any of that.
We won. Yeah, maybe we make some money now.
How big an issue was money?
I'm a small business owner and the last 4 years of crippling. Just absolutely haven't made a dime.
I think it's a woman running.
She wasn't a strong enough candidate?
Oh no, she was strong. It's just they don't think a woman needs to be a president.
No tax on overtime. Huge.
That's a good promise.
That was a big one for me, yeah. I hope he follows through with that.
Why do you think 50% of the country feels the complete opposite?
I don't know. I cannot.
I think they're crazy. They don't know any better.
I mean, do they like high prices? Do they like people taking their jobs? Do they like wars? I mean, do they like the country?
Awesome. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mike Armstrong at a diner in Pennsylvania. That is Global National for this Wednesday from Washington. I'm Donna Friesen. This is a look at the White House. President Joe Biden still lives there, but in January, it will be Donald Trump's domain again as he becomes the 47th president of the United States. Thanks for watching.